Hi, my name is Dionne Codrington. Welcome to Changemakers, the podcast. This special is a spin-off from the Black Changemakers, a CBC series that highlights folks from Quebec's Black communities who are giving back, making a difference, and inspiring others to do the same. Today, we have profiled 88 Changemakers. You can read all about our laureates' work online. Just look up CBC Quebec Black Changemakers. Over the course of the last 3 years, I found myself wondering what really makes someone a changemaker. So in this podcast, I'm taking a deeper dive into the DNA of these leaders. I want to know just what makes someone a changemaker, what's the source of their motivation, and just what it takes for everyday people to shift from self to service. Over the course of 4 episodes, I'll introduce you to some of our changemakers, all from different walks of life. And by the end of our conversation, I hope to uncover what makes them tick, who or what inspires them, and what keeps them going. But this isn't just about finding out how these folks became changemakers. It's also about understanding how anyone can claim space in the world and make a difference. When I invited these changemakers to chat with me, I asked them to choose places and spaces that were meaningful to them. Our walks took us from an old Montreal courthouse to Concordia University's campus in Montreal's West End.
People involved in social change, like we might think of Malcolm or Martin, and not always think of hundreds of people that were organizing with them. Maybe that's something that disempowers us, because then we don't think of like, hey, I'm creating change every day. Like, you don't have to be a leader, you know?
In this episode, Mubeenah Mughal. Mubeenah Mughal is a changemaker whose acts of service have taken on many different forms. From her advocacy work for undocumented migrants and the blind, to her role as a parent commissioner for the English Montreal School Board, and all points in between, Mubeenah approaches every task with what she calls an activist heart. For her, that means that whether she's home with loved ones or out in the world, she's open to opportunities to create change. On a cool spring morning, Mubeenah and I went for a walk along the Lachine Canal, just steps from her home in Point St. Charles. Mubeenah is a slight, unassuming woman with a warm smile. But it doesn't take long to discover that her bite is actually worse than her bark. It's clear to anyone in her orbit that this mom of 3 and mama bear for her community, that Mubeenah is a changemaker. But it's a title that she struggles with. So part of the change that I'm making, getting her to accept her flowers, recognize the impact of her contributions, and understand how by standing in the light, she might inspire others to do the same. All that by the end of this conversation. I think what I think about, our change makers, and sometimes we can very easily kind of categorize, this one's a doctor or maybe this one's a lawyer. How would you define yourself?
Complicated. I think I was kind of shocked when I got nominated as a changemaker, because I also, most of us think of people in positions of authority or power or something, and I guess that's also the model that many people involved in social change, we might think of Malcolm or Martin and not always think of hundreds of people that were organizing with them, maybe that's something that disempowers us, because then we don't think of hey, I'm creating change every day. You don't have to be a leader,
What's your definition of a leader?
I mean, it's someone who is invested in their community, because we all take up space in a community, whatever identities we have. And if we're all trying to better our communities, I guess that helps society at large. Yeah.
So then let's go back. The first time I met Mubeenah was at a virtual event. We were still dealing with pandemic restrictions, and we wanted to celebrate that year's changemakers any way we could. These laureates all had something in common. They'd made something out of nothing. For most of them, it was the first time they got to sit shoulder to shoulder with their fellow changemakers, or screen to screen anyways. That night was an opportunity for them to celebrate each other, talk about their passions, and dream out loud together. As they were introduced, I could see how some folk were happy to be in the room, but I imagined that had we been in person, some would also have been grateful to have a wall to press themselves against or a dark corner to hide in. I could see some of them actually shrink away from the camera and get that look that said, "Please don't call on me." As passionate as they all were about their work, I witnessed imposter syndrome personified. Now that's something I think we all struggle with to different degrees. Who am I? Am I enough? And for these folk, do I really deserve to be called a changemaker?
So then let me circle back. How do you define yourself?
How do I define myself? Wow. Okay, that's not a question. That's a hard question. Sorry.
Yeah.
Like, it's hurting my
They're
heart.
not always going to be easy.
That is a question that's hurting my heart.
Yeah. Why?
I don't know, because I know like at the banquet, we had a virtual thing
Yeah.
last year, and someone was like, it's hard to take, I don't know, your flowers or whatever.
Mhm.
So then it's like, maybe that's something changemakers have in common. Like you try to minimize the work that you do, or like to be like, oh, it's no big deal. Like I don't do anything, because I don't feel like I don't do anything, but it's like also it's not like it's it's good that it's happening.
Tell you that you're not alone in that, and it doesn't matter what area they come from, what background.
Yeah.
You all struggle with being called
or
a
recognized,
changemaker.
right?
Yes.
So it's like also, I mean, on a certain level, it feels good, and I think that's something that we all need to unlearn. But it also is hard.
Okay.
So, but to define myself,
Yeah.
I mean, I just say, I hate using like activist, whatever, but I guess I am an activist.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I don't hate that word. It just sometimes has a negative connotation, like especially in French, like un militant or whatever. Like it sounds like you're fighting.
Yeah, but you are.
You are fighting,
Yeah.
right?
You
But
can
then
be in
it's
the
like,
good fight.
Yeah, it is good, right? And I guess again, it disempowers us, to be like, oh, good people don't fight, or good people are not angry, or like good people, just get along. But
Well, there's something called righteous anger,
right.
I think.
Yes. Activist. Just a human being that lives in the world.
Yeah. So when would you say that your activism started?
I think we're naturally born this way. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm also a religious person. So I think, we're all valuable and special because we all come from God, or like we're all part of this universe, and we come from the universe. Like, even scientifically speaking, parts of our body come from the stars or whatever, so it's like, well, I guess we're all meant to do great things. And then I think parts of the world takes that away from us on the school grounds, or people being bullied or whatever. Like, I feel like that's always been inside of me, to be like, hey, don't do that. In high school, I used to get called like Oprah, like just like, you can't be quiet. You always have to say something.
Okay, so would you say then that your activism started as early as high school?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, sure.
So what did that look like?
I mean, it was mostly like intervening, if someone's getting harassed. So it wasn't necessarily like activism, but it's just like, hey, that's not right. Stop doing that. And our school systems, everything, they don't really try to engage kids to do more, or at least back then. Like, we always had leadership. So it's like, okay, you get all the school spirit, but it's never towards something. We could have been using that energy to be like, like now how they have like the climate march or something.
When do you think, or has that just always been there, that like you found your voice and felt like
it's unfortunate.
you could speak up?
So I'm Muslim. From a young age, living in a place where everyone doesn't do the same thing, you kind of have to be like, oh, I'm not eating today, or like, so you kind of already get used to like having to advocate for yourself in like small ways. Like, oh, I can't eat that. When everyone's eating hot dogs, you get used to having to say things like just for yourself personally.
Okay. I know there's one of our changemakers who had told me that for them, activism is kind of born out of adversity.
Yeah, it is, sadly. I mean, it doesn't always have to be, but it is. And it's interesting because my one son, it makes him really angry that people only care about causes that affect them. You know, so then thinking about like intellectuals or, you know, how now, you know, last few years, pandemic, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, but what about the white people? Why aren't they getting involved in things till now? You know, and where it's just like, yeah, it's true. It sucks that people only get involved in things when they affect them. I mean, he's 16, so obviously quite idealistic. And it's like, I don't think about things like that because I guess it would just make me, you know, more sad because it is true. Like if everybody unites around something that isn't like their dinner table food or whatever, like things could be different.
There's so many others like your son who look out there and they see so much that is wrong and it seems so overwhelming. How do you encourage somebody like that when they think that they don't have the power to change anything?
So it's hope, right? Like we can never lose that. And again, I am a faithful person. So I do think, whatever you want to say, like the devil, negative energy is a liar. And that's like the inner critic or the voice that's there to stop you. Because we are, you know, more powerful than we think we are. And also, we're not gods at the same time. So it's like, I think people are hard on themselves. Many activists, you know, don't necessarily have regular lives because they're so busy working all the time. But it's like, well, it's not just you or me that's going to change things.
Mubeenah and I covered a lot of ground. Literally. I hit my step goal that day. We talked about the power of community, and when she talks about community, it's not just about supporting one another and how much more we can achieve together, but also about the importance of accountability. She explained whether you mean to or not, your actions or inaction can contribute to harm, but you can also choose to be more mindful in everyday interactions. Community and accountability are always top of mind, but she finds it just as important to embrace joy.
So where do you find joy?
I do find joy in community and being around others.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. Like I love being around like in intergenerational spaces, which I think is lacking sometimes in like activism.
Why is that important to have?
So we need the elders, you know, so we know their stories and how people did things before us, people now, and then also people coming, right? So we can help shape them or pass down our values so we can also know like what's different, what we could be doing things in better ways.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like if we don't know what came before us, we could still be just doing the same old stuff. And if we don't know what's coming up, you know, when you're interacting with peers, we understand each other, right?
Yeah.
But then if you're interacting with someone older, someone younger, I have to get out of my comfort zone or like learn different things.
Yeah.
So it's like good to always be updating and refreshing.
So it's really not possible to do any of this kind of work in isolation.
Right. Yes. And then also we're doing for each other, right? So it doesn't become like I'm saving you and you're saving me, because then that's gross, where it's like we're all special, we're all change makers, right? So it's like I'm showing others like, hey, you could do this, I could do this. I'm just doing this today. You could be doing this tomorrow, like depending on whatever. And it's like they don't need me, or, you know, I do what I can. And then I guess it's like modeling, right? So then maybe other people can be like, oh, hey, she's doing that. She's not a doctor. She's not a lawyer. And she's doing this. You don't need, you know, to have even read books.
Yeah.
Right?
Everybody has something.
Yeah, to offer, whatever it is. Like some people can sing really well and do fundraising for things, or like, I don't know, make people happy, right? And if everyone is fulfilled and happy, only good things, you know, can happen. So.
And see where we're approaching the corner here, so yeah.
We made our way back to Mubeenah's home in Point St. Charles and settled in on her giant sectional. Light was streaming in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and we were surrounded by happy plants. Her setup was proof of a plant's ability to reduce stress and boost your mood. I immediately started conspiring to get myself invited back, and I'm no fool. I arrived with coffee and fresh croissants. Before this conversation, the last time I saw Mubeenah in person was at a CBC panel about creating more inclusive teaching practices in Quebec schools. It was well attended. The audience members had a lot to say, including Mubeenah, and she got personal.
When you have Black children, you have to be an advocate. Like, I hate to say this. I have another child who went to a school for disabled kids, and they wouldn't allow him to go to regular school. I didn't realize that he was on a modified curriculum until it was too late, and then I still put him in a regular school. I just have to share, because I'm so proud of him, and I did like 5 parent-teacher interviews today before coming here, is my beautiful Black boy. He got like 98 in his science and 99 in math, okay? And he is like amazing. And they told me that I was a bad parent for pushing for him. Like, honest to God, this is what they said. They're just like, you're gonna ruin his self-esteem, without even giving him a chance to try and fail. And then for him to say, this is too hard for me. And it's sad, but that's what I have to say. It's like, you're the person.
So the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you today was because at the panel discussion that we had in March, talking about the paths to success in Black education, there was a little question period at the end that you'll recall, and you spoke up and you shared your story. And I think what struck me then, as I spoke to at least 3 moms immediately after the discussion, was how empowered they felt. And that's specifically the kind of things that they were telling me. The best way I could describe their reaction was that they came away feeling empowered after hearing you speak. And it was really just about you sharing your story. But there was one mom who was telling me that she didn't realize that even if her child was thriving, the importance of going to those parent-teacher meetings. She saw it as like, if they were failing, if there were a problem, you need to show up. But she didn't understand that it was really important for her to be present. There was another mom who felt like your story was very relatable, and that her child was having similar kind of struggles. And she found herself kind of like taking notes and was just like, I didn't know this, and I didn't know that I could do that. And the next steps that she was going to be taking. Yet another mom, also a changemaker, who has been, at the front lines and doing some work, and still felt like she learned some things, and still felt really happy that you shared your story, because there were things that folks just don't know. So that's why, I thought, here again, and this is not probably something that you would see as change making.
Yeah. No, but it is, right? Where it's like, oh, it is.
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
So
that made me so happy to hear that, because it's like, oh, that's making people feel good, instead of making them feel like, oh, why is
and it
life
might
so
make
hard?
them feel angry too, but it, might move some folks to action.
Yes.
Right?
That's great.
If you can think
And that's
back.
about community, the importance of community. It links
Exactly.
back to that, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, if we're not isolated, we can talk to each other and help each other just by like sharing information.
If you think back to that night and think about maybe like what was going through your head as you were hearing the panelists, what was it that led you to speak up?
I mean, the panelists, it was good. I guess there was research on how Black children have been performing.
So some of the things that they were touching on was like,
The Black children being put into remedial classes and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think I did want to speak to that, because it's like, well, some Black children need that. I mean, I guess the part that's wrong is to just assume that if a Black child is struggling, that's what they need, because it could be something else. Different people have different strengths or what we might have from our background. So something is different doesn't mean that this child is disabled. It's just like a different way of communicating or whatever. But there are people that struggle. And I guess it was just realizing how hard it was, because I have 3 kids. So I was more on it with the third one, you know, and I don't want to say neglectful, but in hindsight, like I didn't realize I should have been going to parent-teacher interviews, and I could have been getting more information because he was doing so good in school.
Yeah.
Till later he had problems, right? So maybe I would have picked up on those problems earlier in talking with the teachers. I kind of always felt myself that, but in hindsight, I think I could have been communicated with better because...
Well, when you know better, you do better, right?
Yes, yeah,
So
it's true. I mean, schools are hard because it's part of a system. So, I mean, if we're going to keep it real, we live under white supremacy. So our schools are white supremacy. Like, it's, you know, when you use those words, people are just like, oh my God, you know, obviously no one's wearing sheets here.
I have found when I'm interviewing someone that when they're forced to slow down and reflect, they might have aha moments. Things seem to come together in a way they hadn't before. And I think for Mubeenah, it was the realization that she could speak up for the underdog, sound the alarm, and be the champion she herself never had as a young, Black, Muslim girl growing up in the 80s.
do you remember what you were feeling at that time? Because it was like an opportunity maybe to ask questions.
Yes.
And you took the opportunity to kind of like really just share. Do you remember what it was that you were feeling that led you to share that with the audience?
Oh, I think it's, you know, as many of our parents are immigrants, I don't fault them. They didn't know like how it works, or my parents weren't really paying attention to what was going on at school. Who knows if it's like a part of me wishes they were paying more attention. Like I got diagnosed with ADD as an adult, like 5 years ago. It's like 38. And it's like, well, I did good in school, but imagine if someone had been paying attention to me. So I don't know if it's more that to be like, well, I guess I'm going to pay more attention to what's going on. And it's like these schools are made by a system that doesn't always reflect us. So it's good to be there to make sure, like, oh, did they talk about anything besides racism for Black History Month, or who knows? Like there's like so many different things that we wouldn't know unless you're like there, and all our kids are different, so every child doesn't come home and tell us stuff, which is, I think that's probably why, because your kids could be passing or whatever, but that doesn't mean they're thriving, right? And I think that's maybe why I spoke, because that was totally like my experience, where it's like, well, the school thought he was doing okay, getting 60 something, which is fine, but obviously not if you think your kid is more capable, which he was, but
Yeah.
you know.
What do you wish more parents knew? And not necessarily in terms of like specifically like the school system, but in terms of their ability to actually get things done or be heard. What do you wish more parents knew?
Our kids aren't going to want us there always, but we still need to be there. Like, you know, your kids might be like, hey, this thing is happening at school, it's okay, or not necessarily always being open or honest. But again, it's our job to dig a little, because they're not always going to come to us. Maybe they're trying to save us energy, because they probably also realize how hard it is.
Yeah.
So they don't want to tell us, because then they're like, oh, the mommy's going to try to come and fix this or whatever. Like, or maybe they think they're bothering us. Like, who knows? Because I know sometimes kids don't come to us. And then also think of school as a community. Like it's an extension of like where we send our kids. So we should get to know, I guess, the people, like the community, right? Like it's not either or. Like, you know, when things happen, they're like, oh, your mom never taught you. Or sometimes they're like, oh, your school never taught you. And it's like, no, we're supposed to be working together. So, okay, clearly our kids aren't learning religion or morals, like ethics from school. Okay, so I guess that's
something we can
do
teach
to teach them, right? And hopefully our kids can share with us what's happening at school. Because I think kids think we're so powerful in some ways, or like think we just know everything. So it's like, well, no, if you don't tell me what's happening, we don't know what's happening. And then the schools maybe think that our kids tell us more.
You've talked about having an activist heart. What does that mean?
Just wanting to have things just and equal for everyone. You know, I mean, it's like a value. It's hard when you go down that train where it's like, well, we are living on stolen land. So it's like, well, you can never have things that are good all the time if there's like gross injustice that's unaddressed, you know. So it kind of feels like then we're living in a gaslight situation of like acting like things are good for everybody when it's not. But then it's like if we focus on our sphere, because again, same like in interpersonal relationships, right? Like the only thing I can control is myself. I can't, you know, control you or my kids or my partner.
Yeah. At the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about titles or how people like view themselves or feel empowered to do things. When we think about identities, and you have many different, and we're all very multifaceted, right? So Black, woman, Muslim, queer, how do those multiple identities shape what you think it means to be a change maker? Or how you move in this world as a change maker?
Oh, wow. Like, now I need to take a nap. Sorry. Like, oh, gosh. No, I mean, I guess there's not a lot of spaces that are for me, or, you know, like a white man or whatever. Like, you know, you watch a movie, you watch a show, it's like everything is kind of catered to you. Like, I know when I saw Miss Marvel, I like cried. I didn't even think I was going to be so emotional. I cried for so much. And I think it was like, oh, right, all the hurts of, you know, all the books that I wasn't seen in or shows.
Yeah.
But it's like the closest to representation was Felicity. Like she had her curly hair. Where it's like, oh my God, Mubeenah, I can't even. Like when I was thinking about like shows that like I'm just like, and she just had like big frizzy hair or whatever. Or some white woman. I mean, girl, whatever. It's like, I guess maybe that's why you put energy. Because I mean, for Ramadan, I had queer Muslims over or whatever, and it's like nice because you know if you go to the mosque or like there's so many different places where it's like, oh, there's still something that's like different or. I guess it makes it easier to think about not the underdog, but like, you know, because a place isn't accessible unless it's open to everybody, right? And it's like, well, I have, I guess, some disabilities, but it's thinking about the people that aren't in the room comes easier, I guess. And I think that's what more of us need to do. It's like, well, who's not present? And like, why are they not present? Like even at the school's governing board, there's no childcare and it's like a school. And it's like, hey, what about single parents? So that could be a barrier to people, to participation.
Mubeenah clearly spends a great deal of time thinking about other people's needs, but the last few years have forced her to think about her own needs more seriously. In the fall of 2022, Mubeenah underwent brain surgery. And I think that the way Mubeenah navigated her brain tumor diagnosis and recovery is a testament to her strength and bottomless well of optimism. Post-surgery, when she was able to get back online, she celebrated first bowel movements and bedside massages with the same fervor as a lottery winner. And in many ways, she has won the jackpot. Mubeenah got a second chance at life. The experience put her on the receiving end of change-making.
Right now, since I had my surgery, I have someone that's helping me clean. She comes by, and even like after my regular day yesterday, I was like, oh my God, now imagine if I had to like keep up with my housework. Those are also ways that people can help because, you know, if we're talking about the leader model, yeah, there are, you know, maybe that person has a partner or maybe they have someone that's like cooking for them or like doing the other stuff. So all the work that people do is important and is interconnected. And I do want to come back to the idea of not seeing, you know, to be like, well, I'm not a change maker, because I feel like it's also good to model things for others, right? So then it's like, well, I guess that is a title that should be claimed, because then other people would maybe feel more comfortable claiming it. Because I always think, we all have those people in our lives where it's like, oh, this person is so amazing. Like, even if I think of my mom or, but they just don't want the attention. So it's like, okay, yes, I guess we should claim our titles to be like, yes, and you could do that too, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
Yeah. I want to stay on the point about models. I think what struck me, even when you were talking about Marvel and Felicity and representation, I very quickly could think about the first time I felt or I saw representation, or I could see myself reflected. And that's probably like the first book that I saw in elementary school that had Harriet Tubman on the cover. And the artist had drawn her likeness with like a braid style that my mom would do for me. And I remember first seeing the image at a time when I was doing a lot of, just like you said, Little Women was definitely on my bookshelf, or like Nancy Drew. There wasn't like
Yes.
anything
Oh my God, yes.
out there. And then reading her story and what she had done for her community, for her people. Who was that first role model for you where you kind of saw yourself reflected or felt like,
oh gosh,
I can do something?
Do you remember, there was like a series of books, like it had like Marie Curie, Louis Pasteur, Harriet Tubman. It was like, oh, the value of helping. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Like, Google
Thank you.
Google it.
Oh my God. Yes. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Right. The value of helping.
So in our conversation about role models, we naturally went off on a tangent about setting boundaries. I think that change-making can almost be a bit of a compulsion. Once you get a taste for it, helping others, making a difference, it's easy to feel like you always need to step up.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really hard for me to like sit down and not get involved. Like, let's say I'm walking and, there's some guy that's not being allowed in a space. And I'm like, oh, this looks like racism, to just like not stop and intervene. When sometimes it's like, okay, Mubeenah, you don't have to intervene in every situation, just walk away.
Yeah, you can put your cape down.
Yes, but then it gets
off.
hard. And then also, like, especially when you have kids or they have friends or whatever, you just want to,
Why do you always feel compelled to step in?
I'm not sure. I mean, in our faith, we say alhamdulillah, to like praise God, like for everything. So it's like, this looks like it's a messed up situation.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is there to get us to our greatest good. If I can do a small thing to make the situation better, why not?
Okay.
I guess is kind of the thing.
But when do you shut off?
I know.
Because there's a lot of small things.
I know. So this is what I'm learning. So I got sick, so I have like smaller resources, or like I have less energy. So there's a lot of things where it's like, okay, that has to go on a to-do list for later. Like, oh, I need to have like a parking lot somewhere where I just like write stuff down because there's someone else out there. And I need to believe. I mean, I do believe there's other people, right? So it's like someone else is going to come in and fill it. And I think as activists, we can't think it's just us. So it's like, no, I trust in my community that someone else is going to do so. And who knows, maybe it'll be my son's friends, or who even knows. And it's kind of exciting to see, like, okay, where will it come from?
Yeah. So your health forced you.
Yes, I know, and I hate that because it's like
slow down now that you're kind of like getting back somewhat to yourself. Are you able to kind of?
I need to learn limits. This is I think everything in moderation, right? Where it's just like it's so easy to like go sometimes, but then it's like you could be hurting yourself or hurting your relationships, or neglecting other parts of your life. And I guess now, at least on social media, it's like all this stuff about self-care, or you don't want to burn out, so then you have nothing to give. And with my medical stuff, where it's like, oh, I have to learn my limits before I reach depletion, because now the refilling is harder. So it's like paying attention, being present, I guess, to be like, okay, I think I'm starting to get tired. So, but then that's where community comes in, like not delegating, but working with others and not working alone in our spaces.
Setting boundaries is hard for many of us. And since Mubeenah embarked on this new journey, she's more aware of higher risks to her health. It's forced her to try to set boundaries in all aspects of her life. One thing her surgery hasn't affected, though, is her determination to do good, do her part, and encourage others to do better.
So, what's the dream, Mubeenah? What's an ideal world look like for you?
Oh my God. An ideal world would be people only doing things that make them happy.
So what's the world that you're fighting for?
Oh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I mean, for people to be free, real freedom and justice. It's so gross to think of people whose ancestors had their land taken away, or now present day Indigenous people get arrested for, trying to take back or reclaim their own spaces. Yeah, it would just be nice, to be in a world where people didn't have to fight for basic freedom or justice, equality, being seen as people. That's a big one. There's so many people that are hyper visibilized but then not seen. And it's imagine if everyone could be seen. It's a nice feeling, right? It is such a nice feeling. Even just thinking about it, I'm like, oh, wow. And you don't have to explain yourself. Especially, in Quebec, where I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that people feel so threatened by different identities.
What is a change maker? That's going to be my last question for you, and then you can go and lie down.
I mean, a change maker is someone who uses their powers for good. No. Because we all have power, and we can make a decision, right? I can use my power to not do anything. I can use my power to, make more money so I can take a trip, or I can use my time and energy to build things with others. And so a change maker is someone that goes out into the world and wants to leave it better than they found it.
Sounds good to me.
Yes. I'm like, oh my God, this is great that you're doing this. I'm like, oh, wow, this is good.
That was Mubeenah Mughal, a community activist and 2022 CBC Black Changemaker. I'm Dionne Codrington. You've been listening to Changemakers, the podcast. The show is produced by Melissa Findera. For more on Mubeenah Mughal and our other CBC Black Changemakers, visit the website at cbc.ca/blackchangemakersqc. Thanks for listening.